We're still in Romans 11, verse 11, with this short sentence, through their fall, salvation is coming to the Gentiles. And I tried to show that to you, that this is the ongoing theme in the Gospel of Matthew, in the book of Acts, and in the philosophy of Maimonides. I could show you more Jewish literature where this is central. Now, I told you that for me it was somewhat difficult to hear from a rabbi, to study with him, that Christianity falsifies the Torah and scatters the Jewish people and destroys the Jewish people. But to be honest, if you look who is today mainly engaged in, for example, the BDS movement, it's Christian churches. Try to look at it from a Jewish point of view. It's very humiliating. But I want to take you into Isaiah 49 and show to you, at that time, when I studied Maimonides about the kings and their wars, with one rabbi, I studied with another rabbi Isaiah 49, and suddenly it came together that Maimonides is using the same words like the prophet Isaiah. He doesn't quote him. He doesn't allude to him, but he says exactly the same thing. I want to read it to you. It says there, listen, coastlands, to me. Give attention, you nations from afar. The Lord called me from the womb, from the body of my mother. He remembered my name. He set my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand, he hides me. We know at once, if we hear these words, this is the prophet talking about Yeshua, the Messiah. He appoints me to be a polished arrow, and in his quiver, he hides me away. Now we already have the face of him in front of us, right? And the prophet does something very, very interesting if we continue reading. He tells me, you are my servant Israel. In you I glorify myself. I won't go into depth into that now, but it's a very interesting phenomenon and a very important phenomenon that the prophet Isaiah brings the servant of the Lord together as the nation of Israel and the king of Israel. I know that some theologians try to solve that in saying, okay, it is Jesus now who represents Israel and we are his body, so we are Israel. But it's not that way. We are misled if we believe that. Let's continue with the prophet and give him our ears and not to Christian theology. It is now the servant of the Lord who says in verse 4, I said, I have labored in vain for chaos and vanity. I have spent my energy. We see here a servant of the Lord who has to gather Israel, and he looks at them and I do it in vain. It doesn't work. And the only thing he can say is, yes, surely my right is with the Lord. My activity, my recompense, what I'm supposed to get for what I'm working for is with my God. We see a servant crying in pain, not just in bodily pain, but in deep, deep pain because his calling is not working out. And now the Lord speaks to him. I'm in verse 5. He who formed me from the womb to be servant to him, for what purpose? To return Jacob to him. Now it's very important to me, please open your Bibles on this. It's Isaiah 49 verse 5, because it goes now on and it says in Hebrew, Yisrael lo ya'asef. And I can say that in Hebrew and go to any Hebrew-speaking person who has no theology and say, what does it mean? and they will tell me that it means, but Israel and Israel will not be or was not gathered or will not be gathered. This is what the text says. And the rabbi said, this cannot be. And so they changed one letter that changed the sense, and our Christian translations, most of them, go with the rabbinic change because they said it cannot be. If the Messiah comes and gathers Israel, it will be gathered. But it makes sense why the servant of the Lord here is crying out, saying, I want to gather, but it doesn't work. I'm working in vain for nothing. He uses very, very strong language here. Israel is not gathered is the original wording of the text and should be there in our translations. To understand, look how it goes on. It's now the Lord who turns to this desperate servant of the Lord and tells him what? It is too little that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to bring them back, the dispersed survivors of Israel. I have made you also a light to the Gentile nations to be my salvation up to the ends of the earth. You feel you should learn Hebrew. You feel we should dig into the original Hebrew text. And it's not easy to understand. And we have to learn rabbinic translations or rabbinic traditions to understand why did they change it here. And then we see suddenly, we remember that in Acts 13 in Antioch Pisidia, actually Paul is quoting this passage. In telling the Jewish people there, now I'm free to go to the Gentiles because this is what the prophet already said, and we see it here in the synagogue in Antioch Pisidia.